Welcome to the Expat Edge with Marcus and Matt, where we answer your questions about becoming an expat to help you thrive abroad. Hey everyone, welcome to the Expat Edge. In this video, we're going to talk about who would have a hard time becoming an expat. I've met quite a few people living in Russia, quite a few expats. When I was in English teaching, I've seen lots and lots of teachers come through from different countries, and I could kind of pinpoint which ones would make it and which ones would go home early. Matt, what are some of the things that kind of would separate the people who would be a good expat or who would have a hard time?
Right. Well, I think the number one sort of personality factor is how you handle change. I mean, your entire life, no matter how much you plan, is going to be completely different than it is in your home country. One of the questions I usually ask people, if they ask me, would I be a good expat? I usually just say, okay, if you've never lived abroad and you're considering moving abroad, let's say they live in Maine, I would say, okay, can you imagine picking up tomorrow, moving to Seattle, Washington, and finding all new friends and getting your hobbies sort of integrated? And if their first response is, yeah, that would be difficult for me, then you're probably going to have a good shot at being an expat. But it's, a lot of people, they'll say, well, my mother's not doing very good health-wise, and, I've been helping her with this, or, my sister needs help with that, or I've been doing this with my friend. But like all of these, I don't want to call them excuses. I mean, some people have life issues that they need to tend to, and they're more important than where they're going to live or what job they have. And I'm not going to judge anyone for that. But those types of situations are going to make expat life incredibly hard. If people have lived in the same town their entire life, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to become an expat, especially if you're over, let's say, 22 years old. If you lived, one place, then you went to college in that place, and then you got your first job in that place, with every year, it becomes harder and harder and harder to pick up and move to a new place. If you've already got kids and a spouse, I mean, it's going to be even more difficult. But I think young people, as long as you haven't, really rooted your life in one place, you're going to have a pretty good chance, unless you have kind of reasons that you need to be in that place.
That's an interesting point, because if you've moved around within the US or whatever country you're from, right? If you move from town to city, maybe you've served in the military, maybe you've gone to university in a different place. That's one factor that could obviously make it easier, right? Because you have adapted to change, radical change in your life. We get some people at Let's Russia reaching out for, and they've never been anywhere, and they're going to Russia. And I've been surprised that some of them are very gung-ho and willing to head to Russia. Obviously, they're going for a specific reason, tourism, to meet someone, whatever it is. Generally speaking, you're right, but it's not necessarily the single factor where. So it's kind of interesting to have that conversation with people and see, okay, you've never been anywhere. And then, you hear them say something like, oh, I've been to Canada or I've been to Mexico. Well, I mean, that's not really the same. So yeah, adapting to change, having been in different situations in your life.
Right, kind of resiliency.
Would be a really good indicator.
It's always been hard for me to understand this point of view. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I have always never struggled with change. It's always been very easy for me to adapt to any new situation, whether it's a new country, new town, new university, new job. I mean, that's never been a challenge for me. But I know some people, their personality makes it very difficult to adjust to these types of things. If you're one of those people, just know that, and know that you're going to have to cope with lots of different change. I mean, literally, if you're changing a job and going to do it in a new country where you've never been, or even just as a tourist, it doesn't make much difference. I mean, literally every single thing you do in your life is going to have to be rearranged, right? You're going to have to find a new grocery store. You're going to have to find a new brand of every food you eat. You're going to have to find, new clothes. I mean, it really is a completely different change. Some people, like me, I love that. Like, that aspect of life is the most interesting, and that's what I find life is worth living for. But other people, that's like a nightmare scenario. And if that's a nightmare scenario for you, then you're really going to struggle. One interesting thing, I'd like to hear your opinion on this, Marcus. We both watched Nomad Capitalist videos, and, he talks about advising people with tons of money on doing this. And he says he hears every excuse in the book why someone can't do this. Well, my wife doesn't want to move, or, my kids are in school, this, that, and the other thing. But it's funny because they start the conversation by saying, I want to lower my tax and move to another country, or I want to, have a different life experience. I don't like what's going on in the US. But then you find all these insignificant reasons why you shouldn't do it. I mean, why? You've dealt with, far more people than I have, Marcus, moving and becoming expats the first time. But why do people do this? They really want to make a change, but they find every little reason not to do it.
I've talked to a lot of people who, when I visit the US or talk to somebody online, maybe from high school or from college, and we're chatting, and they're like, where are you living these days? And I tell them, I'm in Russia, or I'm in Germany. I hear, even from strangers, right? They say this phrase, I wish I could do that.
My
or
gosh.
I wish I been able to, but now I'm too old. And I'm like, well, it's really a mindset thing. And I don't know why. It's probably fear, right? Fear of change, fear of the unknown, because you don't know how things will turn out. You don't know what it's going to be like. And that's kind of the comfort of being a tourist, right? You can go, it's kind of dabbling in it and then coming back to your normal life. But really, there's no excuse. Well, I mean, there are excuses, like you mentioned before. There are serious issues, health issues, of course. But there's no excuse for somebody who is physically able to get up and move and to experience a different country. So I think anybody with that anxiety of it can be done for those people, but I think it needs to just switch in their minds. They need to look at it in a different way.
Right. Well, I always, that expression, I wish I could do that. It's like, well, it didn't take any money to become an expat, or even to travel. It's like, just invest, 5 hours of watching YouTube videos over the next 6 months about how to travel for cheap. I just don't understand why people make statements like that. I don't know. In the US, everyone's always busy. But I'll give another example of this. During COVID, I asked at my last job, I was living in Washington, D.C., which is, I really don't like living in Washington, D.C. There are some really cool aspects of living there, like all kinds of different international groups and whatnot, but the actual living there and dealing with people there is really horrible. I would not live there again. So I asked my boss, can I move to Texas? He's like, yeah, I don't care. And then the HR department got involved, and they said, what if everyone wants to change offices during COVID? I said, but they won't. And she's like, yeah, I mean, if the people see you move. I said, no. You know full well that no one else, even if they ask, is actually going to follow through with it. I'm telling you right now that I will pay for the moving truck the minute you give me the okay, then I can move to a different office. She's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're probably right. Do you know how many other people moved? 0. Right. And so it's like, nobody, I worked at a law firm, I still do, but at the time I was working at a big US law firm. Everybody's making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Anyone can move. It's not a money thing. It's simply a mindset. Most people are very, comfortable in their life and don't want to make changes. And if that's you, then expat life is going to be very difficult.
It changes in every minor daily errand imaginable.
Right. Well, I was just used to laugh. People in Russia would be like, oh, I can't find, kettle cooked potato chips. I'm just like, that's the worry of your life.
That's what you're worried about?
Right. It's like, holy moly. Yeah. Their whole expat existence must be miserable if, this is something that's giving them a hard time. That's not to say that I didn't struggle with anything. Of course. I mean, once you've been abroad for a long time, you want to have tomato sauce and spaghetti like you ate at home, right? And you just want that. But what I'm saying overall, if you struggle with these types of changes, then it's going to be a tough life being an expat. But still possible, definitely.
Right, yeah. Okay, so what are some of the other things that you were going to mention? Obviously, being able to, unable to change things.
I mean, those are really the key. I mean, for me, being able to, risk too. I mean, you have to be, I moved to Russia. You have to be pretty ready to take some sort of risk, right? Because going abroad, there's lots of risk for career, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, I think your life is in your hands. I mean, for me, taking a risk, going to another country, having a job there, and how will employers perceive that in my home country if I return, or in the next country? It's all how you kind of sell it, I guess.
So overall, it's the change. But one thing that I have pinpointed is how people are tied to material things. And so I've heard a lot of people say something like, oh, I couldn't leave my job for more than this amount of time. And then in my mind, the question is, well, you can change jobs, but that's not a question. That's not even a possibility
right.
in the other person's mind. So that's kind of my reaction. But another thing is, oh, what would I do with my garden or my house or my dogs? Well, okay, dogs aren't material things, but you get what I mean.
Right.
Is like something that is holding them back from experiencing different place,
right.
different culture. That I think, okay, well, could you not maybe find somebody to take your dog for a little while?
Isn't the strangest thing about all this, though, is that this person in some capacities decided they want to live abroad, yet they can't even justify it to themselves.
Yeah.
Right? If someone wants to learn a language, if someone wants to live abroad, for me, it's like I set that as my objective and I do whatever I need to do to get to that point. But some people,
right.
I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed this too, just like to dream. They don't even want to do anything.
Yeah.
They just.
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice, but.
Right. Then why are they, wanting to have a consultation with about how to move to another country? I don't know. It's just interesting. So just if you're thinking about moving abroad, just keep these things in mind, that most people probably who say they want to move abroad really just are kind of dreaming. And maybe they're, getting some sort of satisfaction from that. But for me, if I'm dreaming about doing something, I want to actually do it.
Right. If you're apprehensive about going to a different country or seeing yourself as an expat, reflect on those things. Is it the mindset? Is it things tying you down that don't necessarily need to tie you down? And explore those opportunities in different places, because you won't regret it. Put out a plan to overcome those things if you really want to experience another country and culture abroad.
Right. So hopefully that was helpful. If you've got questions about whether you should be an expat, hopefully this was helpful. But if not, let us know in the comments and we'll be happy to share our thoughts. We'll see you in the next video. This was the Expat Edge with Matt and Marcus. We hope you enjoyed the video. Visit theexpatedge.com for even more content that will help you thrive abroad. You can submit your ideas for video topics and sign up for free at theexpatedge.com. See you there.